My name is Marcus Webb, and for the last 8 years I've been a cook at Forward Operating Base Sullivan, a small US Army installation tucked away in the mountains of Eastern Europe. I know what you're thinking. A cook? Not exactly the hero type, right? But let me tell you, every soldier needs to eat. And in my kitchen, I took pride in making sure our troops started every day with a decent meal. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and it was mine. The morning of April 12th started like any other. I woke up at 0430 hours, splashed cold water on my face, and made my way through the dark corridors of the base toward the mess hall. The air was crisp, almost freezing, and I could see my breath forming small clouds as I walked. Spring in the mountains came late, and patches of snow still clung to the shadowed corners of the compound. I unlocked the kitchen door and flipped on the lights. The fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, illuminating rows of stainless steel counters, industrial ovens, and my domain for the better part of a decade. I started the coffee first, always the coffee. Strong, black, and enough to wake the dead. The soldiers would start filtering in around 0600, tired from night watch or early PT, and that first cup was sacred to them. As the coffee brewed, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma, I began prep work for breakfast. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and oatmeal. Nothing fancy, but made with care. I'd learned early in my career that consistency mattered. Soldiers could handle a lot of uncertainty in their lives, but knowing they'd get a solid breakfast every morning, that was something they could count on. The kitchen had become my sanctuary over the years. I knew every inch of it, which burner ran hot, which refrigerator door stuck slightly, where the best knives were kept. I'd trained 3 junior cooks during my time here, watched them arrive fresh-faced and nervous, then leave confident and skilled. There was something deeply satisfying about that, about passing on knowledge and seeing people grow. Sergeant First Class Jennifer Hayes was always my first customer. She'd been stationed here for 2 years, a signals intelligence specialist who worked the night shift monitoring communications. She pushed through the door at exactly 0545, just as she had every single morning for 24 months. "Morning, Marcus," she said, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "Tell me you've got that magic brew ready." I poured her a cup and slid it across the counter. "When have I ever let you down, Sergeant?" She wrapped her hands around the mug and took a long sip, closing her eyes. "You're a saint, you know that? Just a cook doing his job." She opened her eyes and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're more than that, Marcus. You're part of what keeps this place running." I waved off the compliment, uncomfortable with praise. I was support staff, not combat arms. The real heroes were the infantry soldiers, the medics, the pilots. I just made sure they didn't go hungry. But Jennifer wasn't finished. "I'm serious. You've been here longer than most of the brass. You know this base better than anyone. You've seen commanders come and go, units rotate in and out. You're the constant, don't sell yourself short." Before I could respond, the base alarm system erupted in a deafening wail that made both of us jump. It wasn't the standard wake-up call or the drill alarm. This was different. 3 long blasts followed by 2 short ones. The invasion alert. Jennifer's coffee mug hit the floor and shattered. Her face went pale. "That's not a drill," she whispered. My heart started pounding. We'd practiced for this scenario dozens of times over the years, but I'd always assumed it would remain theoretical. This base was supposed to be safe, stable, routine. The next hour was pure chaos. Soldiers poured out of barracks, some still pulling on their uniforms, others already in full combat gear. Officers shouted orders that were barely audible over the continuing alarm. Through the kitchen window, I could see vehicles racing across the compound, headlights cutting through the early morning darkness. I stood frozen in my kitchen, unsure of what to do. My training had covered emergency procedures, but I'd never actually believed I'd need to use them. This was supposed to be a quiet posting, a routine assignment. We were a support base, not a frontline combat outpost. Colonel Richard Patterson's voice crackled over the PA system, cutting through the alarm. "This is not a drill. We have confirmed enemy armor approaching from the northeast. All personnel report to defensive positions immediately. This is not a drill. Enemy armor. Tanks." The words didn't seem real. Lieutenant Marcus Chen burst into the kitchen, his young face tight with stress. He was only 24, fresh out of West Point, and this was his first real command situation. "Webb, we need to evacuate non-combat personnel. Grab your go bag and report to the vehicle depot." "Sir, what about—" "That's an order, Specialist. Move." I started toward the door, then stopped. Through the kitchen window, I could see the main gate. Our defensive positions were undermanned, I'd been on this base long enough to know our manning levels, and we'd been running at 60% capacity for months due to budget cuts and reassignments. I could see Corporal Jamie Rodriguez, barely 20 years old, struggling to maneuver a 50 caliber machine gun into position by himself. It normally took 3 people. Something inside me shifted. Maybe it was 8 years of watching these soldiers, getting to know their stories, their families, their dreams. Maybe it was the realization that if I ran now, I'd never be able to live with myself. Or maybe it was just stubbornness, the same stubborn pride that made me insist on serving hot meals even during supply shortages. I thought about all the conversations I'd had over morning coffee. Rodriguez telling me about his younger sister's quinceañera, Private Kim talking about her dreams of teaching elementary school, Sergeant Stone sharing photos of his grandchildren. These weren't just soldiers to me anymore. They were people I cared about. "Lieutenant," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "With respect, sir, I'm staying." Chen turned back, his eyes wide. "Webb, you're a cook, not a combat soldier. You need to..." "I went through basic training just like everyone else, sir. I qualified expert on the M4, and right now you need everybody you can get on that wall." For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Gear up, report to the northeast bunker, and Webb, thank you." I ran back to my quarters, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. My hands shook as I pulled my old combat gear from the bottom of my footlocker, gear I hadn't worn in years. The vest was dusty. The helmet felt foreign on my head, but the weight of it was familiar somehow, like muscle memory kicking in. I checked my watch. Less than 15 minutes had passed since the alarm first sounded, but it felt like hours. As I loaded magazines and adjusted straps, part of my mind was still processing what I'd just committed to. I was a cook. I'd spent nearly a decade avoiding combat situations. Now, I was voluntarily running toward one. By the time I made it to the northeast bunker, I could hear the distant rumble of engines, heavy engines, tank engines. Sergeant Major Robert Stone was there, a grizzled veteran with 28 years of service. He looked at me in surprise. "Webb, what the hell are you doing here?" "Reporting for duty, Sergeant Major." He studied my face for a long moment, then handed me an M4 rifle and 3 magazines. "Position yourself at window 3. Conserve your ammo. Don't fire until you have a clear shot. And Webb?" "Yes, Sergeant Major. Thanks for staying. It means something, you being here. Means a lot, actually." I nodded, not trusting my voice. I took my position and waited. The tanks appeared as the sun began to rise, their dark silhouettes emerging from the tree line like prehistoric monsters. I counted 4 of them, T-72s, if I remembered my vehicle identification training correctly. Behind them, I could see infantry soldiers, maybe 40 or 50 of them moving in tactical formation. Our base had 233 personnel on a good day. Right now, with various missions and rotations, we had maybe 150, and we were a support base. Our defensive capabilities were designed to hold off a small raid, not a full armor assault. The morning light was growing stronger, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Instead, it illuminated an advancing enemy force that outgunned and outnumbered us. "Contact front!" someone shouted, and the world exploded into noise. Our anti-tank weapons opened up first, shoulder-fired missiles that streaked across the open ground toward the advancing armor. I watched as one missile impacted the lead tank, but the explosion seemed to just bounce off its reactive armor. The tank kept coming, inexorable, unstoppable. Then their main guns fired, and I understood what real fear felt like. The bunker shook as rounds impacted near our position, throwing up geysers of earth and concrete dust. The windows shattered, raining glass down on us. I felt something cut my cheek, felt the warm trickle of blood, but couldn't process it through the overwhelming sensory assault. "Return fire! Return fire!" Sergeant Major Stone was yelling, but his voice sounded distant, muffled by the ringing in my ears. I raised my rifle, trying to remember my training. Breathe, aim, squeeze. The rifle kicked against my shoulder as I fired 3-round bursts at the advancing infantry. I couldn't tell if I was hitting anything. Everything was smoke and confusion and noise. Next to me, Private First Class Sarah Kim was crying as she fired her weapon, tears streaming down her face. She was 19 years old. She'd told me just last week that she was saving money to go to college, that she wanted to be a teacher, that she loved working with kids. "Keep your head down, Kim," I shouted at her. "Watch your sectors. Remember your training." She nodded, wiping at her eyes with one hand while maintaining her grip on her rifle with the other. "I'm scared, Sergeant Webb. I'm really scared." "Me too, kid. Me too. But we've got each other's backs, okay? You and me. We're getting through this." More explosions. One of our Humvees erupted in flames, the ammunition inside cooking off like fireworks. I saw soldiers running, saw some of them fall and not get back up. This wasn't like the movies. There were no heroic speeches, no dramatic music, just terror and chaos and the bitter taste of gunpowder and the acrid smell of burning fuel. The tanks were getting closer. 200 meters, 150. At this range, they could tear our bunker apart with direct fire. I could see the main gun on the nearest tank traversing, searching for targets. Then I heard a sound that made my heart soar, the distinctive roar of an A-10 Warthog. Our close air support had arrived. The aircraft came in low and fast, its GAU-8 Avenger cannon tearing into the enemy armor, with a sound like a giant zipper being ripped open. I watched as one tank, then another, erupted in flames, their ammunition cooking off in secondary explosions. But the infantry kept coming. They were professionals, I realized. They didn't panic when their armor support was destroyed. They adapted, using the burning tanks as cover, spreading out, continuing their advance. They were 75 meters out now, close enough that I could see their faces, could see they were just as scared as we were. Young men probably conscripted, following orders just like us. I fired at a soldier moving between cover points. He went down. I didn't know if I'd hit him or if he'd just taken cover. I didn't want to know. Sergeant Major Stone was on the radio, his voice calm despite the chaos. "All positions, fall back to secondary defensive line. Covering fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." We laid down suppressive fire as soldiers from the outer positions ran back toward the main compound. I went through 2 magazines, my rifle hot in my hands. Kim was still beside me, still crying, but still firing. She was keeping it together. "Webb, Kim, fall back now!" Stone was pulling at my vest, physically dragging me away from the window. We ran in a crouch, bullets snapping through the air around us. I saw Rodriguez go down, clutching his leg. Without thinking, I changed direction, running to him. "Leave me!" he shouted. "Get to cover!" "Not happening, kid." I grabbed him under the arms and started dragging him. He screamed in pain, but I didn't stop. Stone appeared on the other side, helping me carry Rodriguez's weight. We made it to the secondary position, a reinforced building near the command center. Medics immediately swarmed Rodriguez, and I collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. The battle lasted 4 hours, though it felt like days. By the time enemy forces finally withdrew, harassed by our air support and facing stronger resistance than they'd anticipated, our base was a wreck. Buildings were damaged, vehicles destroyed, fires burning everywhere. The smell of smoke and cordite hung heavy in the air. But we'd held. Against all odds, against superior firepower and numbers, we'd held our ground. I sat outside the ruined mess hall, my back against the wall, completely exhausted. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Around me, medics were treating wounded soldiers, and everyone who could still stand was helping with the aftermath. I counted 11 body bags lined up near the medical tent. 11 soldiers who wouldn't be going home. I thought about the breakfast I'd been preparing that morning, the coffee that never got served, the routine that had been shattered. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. Colonel Patterson appeared, his uniform torn and covered in soot. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one morning. He sat down beside me without saying anything for a long moment, both of us just staring at the destruction. "You're a cook," he finally said. "Yes, sir." "You should have evacuated." "Yes, sir. But you stayed. You fought." "Sergeant Major Stone tells me you helped hold the northeast bunker, kept Kim focused when she was panicking, dragged Rodriguez to safety under fire. He says you probably saved multiple lives today." I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt sick and scared and grateful to be alive and guilty about the people who weren't. "Sir, I couldn't leave. These are my people. I've cooked for them, talked with them, watched them grow. Rodriguez is just a kid. Kim has her whole life ahead of her. I couldn't run while they fought." Patterson nodded slowly. "Your people. Yeah, I understand that." He stood up, groaning at the effort. "When this is over, when they write up the after-action report, your name is going in it. What you did today mattered, Webb. It really mattered." Over the next few days, as we cleaned up and reinforced our positions, something changed in the way people treated me. Soldiers who'd never given me a second glance before would nod as they passed, or stop to shake my hand. Kim hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack, thanking me over and over for keeping her focused during the fight. Rodriguez, his leg in a cast, hobbled over on crutches. "You saved my life, Sergeant Webb. I was dead if you'd left me there. Stone helped too, and the medics. It wasn't just me. But you came back for me. You could have kept running, gotten to safety. But you came back." I helped him sit down and we watched the reconstruction efforts in silence. Workers were already repairing damage, removing debris, restoring order. Life went on somehow. But the person who affected me most was Jennifer Hayes. She found me 3 days later as I was trying to salvage what I could from my destroyed kitchen. She didn't say anything at first, just started helping me pick through the debris. "I was in the command bunker," she said quietly, stacking broken dishes. "Safe underground doing my job while you were out there fighting. I heard everything on the radio. I heard when they thought the northeast line was going to break. I heard Stone calling for covering fire to pull you guys back. I heard Rodriguez screaming when he got hit. You were doing your job just like I did mine. No, Marcus, you went beyond your job, way beyond." She stopped working and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You showed everyone here what it really means to be a soldier. It's not about your MOS or your rank or your job description. It's about standing up when you're needed, even when you're terrified, especially when you're terrified." I wanted to argue, to deflect, but I was too tired. Instead, I just nodded and kept sorting through the wreckage of my kitchen. 2 weeks later, I stood in formation with 100 other soldiers as Colonel Patterson pinned a bronze star with Valor device on my chest. He said something about exemplary courage and selfless service, about how my actions embodied the highest traditions of military service, but honestly, I barely heard it. I was looking at the faces around me. Kim, Stone, Chen, Jennifer, Rodriguez on his crutches, all the people I'd served with and fought beside. That's what the medal was really for, I realized. Not for any individual act of heroism, but for being part of something bigger than myself, for choosing to stand with my people when I could have run. That night, I reopened the mess hall. The kitchen was still damaged, but I managed to get one stove working and brewed a pot of coffee. Soldiers filtered in, drawn by the familiar smell, and for a little while we sat together in the partially destroyed dining area, drinking coffee and not talking about the battle. Someone made a joke, someone else laughed. Slowly, painfully, we were finding our way back to normal, or at least to a new version of normal, because that's what mattered, I'd learned. Not the moments of violence and chaos, but these quiet moments after. The coffee shared with people who'd become family. The routine that said life goes on, we survive, we take care of each other. The simple act of showing up day after day, doing your job with care and pride, being present for the people who depend on you. I'm still a cook. I still make breakfast every morning, still brew that first pot of coffee. But now when I look at the soldiers filing through my line, I see them differently. I see the courage it takes just to show up, to do your job, to be reliable in an unreliable world. And they see me differently too. Kim started helping me in the kitchen during her off-duty hours, saying she wanted to learn to cook like I did. Rodriguez brought his younger sister's college essay for me to proofread, trusting me with something important to his family. Stone started joining me for coffee before the morning rush, sharing stories from his decades of service. The base slowly returned to its routine. The damaged buildings were repaired. The destroyed vehicles were replaced. The scars faded, at least the visible ones. But something fundamental had changed in me. I'd spent 8 years thinking of myself as just a cook, as support staff, as someone on the periphery of what really mattered. Now I understood that everyone matters. Every job, every person, every act of showing up and doing your best, it all matters. On the morning of the invasion, I was just a cook who made coffee. By the end of that day, I'd learned that sometimes the most ordinary people are called to do extraordinary things. And sometimes standing your ground with a rifle in your hands starts with the simple decision to not run away, to not abandon the people who depend on you, to be present when presence is all you have to offer. That's my story, not a tale of superhuman heroism or Hollywood dramatics. Just one cook who stayed when he could have left, fought when he could have hidden, and learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite it. It's choosing your people over your safety. It's choosing to be the person you want to be rather than the person your fear tells you to be. The coffee's ready, by the way. Always is. Some things never change, and maybe that's the real point. Maintaining the routine, being the constant, showing up every day and doing your best. Because in the end, that's what builds a community, a unit, a family. I still think about that morning sometimes. I still wake up from nightmares where I see the tanks advancing, hear the explosions, smell the smoke, but I also remember the looks on the faces of the soldiers I fought beside. I remember Kim's gratitude, Rodriguez's relief, Stone's respect, and every morning when I brew that first pot of coffee, I remember that I chose to stay. I chose my people, and I'd make that choice again every single time.